still very exciting today. It has taken some time to get to launches of product and blockbuster status of product, but now Yescarta and Carvykti have reached that stage. So I think this field has matured. I've known Raphael, the founder of Jeito, for a number of years, and I admire what she's been able to create and do. I had, for personal reason, to move back to Europe. Raphael say, you should work more with us, because I was already an advisor of Jeito. And I love the team. I jump and say yes. Probably the most frustrating case for European investors or European companies is the case of Metsera. Metsera was a company funded by Arch Venture and another fund from the US in 2022, sold in 2025, 3 years later for $10 billion to Pfizer. The real asset that created value came from London. There is a lot of gems in Europe. We have to go out and find them.
Bienvenue to a new episode. I'm your host, Philip, and on the Flood Bio Show, I'm talking to the best Europeans in biotech to help you grow. Cell therapy has changed many diseases, especially some cancers, but it came with a lot of challenges. Pascal is a veteran in the space. He has brought the first CAR-T and also the first allogeneic cell therapy to the market. So I went to Paris to catch up with him while he was there. I didn't know him personally, but we have been introduced by a mutual contact from San Francisco. We talked about the beauty of cell therapy. We also talked about his transition to operating partner at major biotech investor Jeito 6 months ago, and why global experience in biotech is so important. So here's my conversation with Pascal, and please hit the like or follow button if you're enjoying it. Today's episode is supported by Osborne Clarke, a legal provider of legal services to biotech and pharma companies. From R&D to commercialization, they help teams navigate regulation, IP, licensing, and even high-value transactions. If you're building a therapeutics company and need legal expertise that understands the industry inside out, feel free to check out the link in the description below to learn more about Osborne Clarke. All right, welcome to the show, Pascal.
Thank you, Philip. Great pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, it's cool. And we have the sun of Paris.
Sunny Paris. It's like June in December.
So, yeah, I want to start with cell therapy a bit at large. I mean, you've basically launched the first CAR-T approved in the US. I mean, Kymriah was Novartis, and then basically the first approved allogeneic cell therapy with Atara. So I'm just wondering, maybe starting with a bit large question, but how do you look at cell therapy as a field as of today?
I think the field is still very exciting today. It has taken some time to get to launches of product and blockbuster status of product, but now Yescarta and Carvykti have reached that stage, and there are some others behind. So I think this field has matured, but it's still there as a huge promise for patients. I mean, the reason I jumped into cell therapy many years ago now was for a personal reason. I mean, I had a friend who had a daughter with leukemia, and she was resistant to chemo initially. And ultimately, she had no choice. So we were trying to find a solution. That was 2012. Okay. It was just a beginning with, you may remember, Emily Whitehead, the first young kid treated at Ipsen by Carl June and his team, that was saved by first Kymriah, the starting point of Kymriah. And when I learned that, I was trying to get that treatment for my friend's daughter. Fortunately enough for her, she ultimately responded to chemo, got into CR, she had a donor, a brother, and she was saved by a transplant. That's how I got interested in cell therapy, because it was truly transformational and able to do something for patients that nothing else was able to do. And this is still the case today. Now, the path to having many products developed, approved, registered, and become really important revenue generator for companies has been much longer than expected. And at the same time, there have been new technologies from bispecifics to now in vivo CAR-T that have challenged a little bit the initial data and situation of these drugs, the first CAR-T being really transformative and bringing huge potential benefit for patients.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there have been this amazing story about autoimmune disease. And that's something, sometimes when you look at something in science, you think, oh, that's obvious. But nobody thought about that before Dr. Schett and a few investigators in Germany had this idea, and there were a few in Asia as well, had this idea to test a CD19 CAR-T in autoimmune patients to see whether B-cell depletion could impact on the disease development and chronicity. And that's what it did. And ultimately, these treatments have shown that you can completely deplete the B-cell for a few months. That allows to deplete the clonal cells that are responsible for autoantibodies, which then do not go again. So you have this amazing situation of drug-free, symptom-free period for a couple of years at least in many patients. Yeah. So the field is still extremely exciting for me and is moving forward.
You're touching on a lot of topics I wanted to jump on as well. Maybe, and one of them, you mentioned the commercialization, which was trickier than expected. Can you go, a bit more in details there? And also I'm curious because Kymriah, you are basically first, but the end, now you have, I think it's generating less revenues than Yescarta and Carvykti. So I'm curious also of how do you look at this one?
I think at the end of the day, it's about data and clinical data. That's what makes a difference. These treatments were truly revolutionary in the sense that they were making huge progress for patients. They were curing leukemia in kids. They were having significant level of CR and prolonged CR in lymphoma and in multiple myeloma. Multiple myeloma is now a chronic disease by many aspects, thanks to the CAR-T that have been developed there. Now, commercialization was very challenging at the beginning, indeed, because it was a very complex logistics, supply, and pricing, reimbursement, and the way just to access patients was complex. I remember when we launched Kymriah, we had to certify the centers. Can you imagine, especially in the US, when you have these big centers like Dana-Farber, like even UPenn was at the origin of it. We had ourselves at Novartis to certify the site so we could use Kymriah in a commercial setting. So that was very unique when you have a pharma company having to come with a team of people to an hospital in the US, very well-known, very famous type of tertiary hospital, to tell them, okay, we're here to certify you, to confirm that you are able to use our product. That was quite something, I can tell you. But ultimately, it was accepted, it went, and it developed this number of certified centers. But you can imagine at the beginning, there were just a few certified, so you could only treat patients in these certified centers. It was part of the approval we got from the FDA. And it was the same for Yescarta. So that was the beginning. That's one example of the challenges you had to be able to circumvent at the beginning to be able to go into treating more patients, getting more patient access. Another aspect was that for many of these patients, leukemia and lymphoma, they had to stay for several weeks very close to the site of their treatment to be able to be monitored for potential side effect or safety challenges there. And that was challenging for the patients because some of these patients had to travel hundreds of miles to go to that particular site and then had to stay there for several weeks. So we had to find solution, both ourselves, but also other companies like Kite and others, to find solution for patients to allow for better patient access.
On the technology side, you also mentioned autologous versus the other ones, and now in vivo. I think it's quite an interesting evolution, and I started looking at CAR-T 2014, quite in detail when I'm starting my first company, and I remember it was overexcitement about autologous because the results were amazing. And then there was even more excitement, or as much excitement for allogeneic because, it was the next generation and could come pretty quickly, but it took way longer than expected. Still in oncology, it's still quite far away from having allogeneic on the market, at least I think so. And now there's a huge excitement for in vivo CAR-T. I think just this year I looked up at some deals. It's crazy. I think at least I wrote four deals that are $300+ million in cash, some in the $1 billion from all the big players. So how do you look at this from a technology point of view?
I think hype and excitement is certainly coming from the data and what these data could mean for patients. And when coming back to the origin, when Carl June and at UPenn, Michel Sadlin at MSKCC were really starting the first patient being treated and so on, the result they got Well, a little bit challenging at the beginning. There was some safety aspect. You had to handle CRS, and they have to learn how to handle CRS and so on. But progressively, the data were so convincing, so exciting, that this created a lot of excitement, not only from patients, from physicians, but also from the industry at large, biotech and pharma. And that led to this first wave of biotech being created or being acquired, whether it's Juno or Kite. Then you had allogeneic, and allogeneic created a similar type of wave at the beginning of excitement, but it took longer than expected to be able to bring this to the market. We can come back to that in a minute. And now it's about in vivo CAR-T, and all this technology makes sense. All these technology are great technologies. All these technologies could make a big difference. Now it is about execution and the ability to transform a few patients like what we have right now in vivo CAR-T into a true development, a regulatory supported type of development that will lead to approval and launch. So that's still a long way, but I think I'm personally very excited to see all of this development. And by the way, it's not a situation where this development, the new development, will just make obsolete everything before. This is additional type of opportunities for patients and also for business creation and value creation. But still, you have to develop product by product, indication by indication, center by center. That's going to take time.
One thing that also quite surprised me. I mean, and you talk even more in details. I mean, obviously the data was surprising, but what was quite surprising is on the first CAR-T that Novartis went very early and themselves with Carl June versus the typical let's let biotechs do the Juno and Kite, and then we acquire them later once they have really good data. Where I'm curious of how come, but and why did it work so well
Yeah, I think it's interesting situation. It's not often the case that it starts in parallel in biotech and in pharma.
Especially in a very new technology.
Very, very new technology. And we really have to pay tribute to a few people like David Epstein, who was at the time the head of pharma, and was really the one that helped the creation of Novartis Oncology. And when he saw the data when they were first into, in fact, a New York Times article, if you believe it, in May 2012, just a few weeks after Emily Whitehead was saved by the first CAR-T being used, CD19 CAR-T in a kid leukemia, and was able to really be completely cured. And now that was 13 years ago now, she's 13 years free of cancer. So that type of amazing data on one patient only created that interest. So that was the idea immediately to license that within Novartis. But it was a challenging situation to bring such very unique technology coming from academia. And academia is amazing in terms of creating new ideas, new innovation, new technologies. But by definition, they don't have a process of manufacturing, a process of development that can make a product till the end line of approval and then commercialization. So there was huge work done by Novartis at the time internally, and different approach to the way to handle that. Initially, it was more license in and try to develop. Then there was a creation of a unit, cell and gene therapy unit within a big pharma, within Novartis. And then that was dismantled. That's where I came in myself, took over all the activities across the different functions and enabling us to bring Kymriah to its first approval at the end of August 2017, and then the second one in 2018 in lymphoma. Now, in parallel, you had this biotech type of model with Kite and Juno that works very well as well to develop product till at least the pivotal studies, and they were acquired at the time in phase
10+ billion acquisitions.
One was 12 billion for Kite, 9 billion for Juno.
Which I remember was excessive amounts at that time. Even in the biotech space, but then But as you said, I think especially Gilead now, it's in the $1 billion plus revenues, blockbuster status. Probably they did okay return on the acquisition. Probably
I will not comment on what's the return on investment there. Now, I think the other interesting in the early days of CAR-T, the only other interesting story is CARVYKTI, because that was, to my knowledge, the first global product originated from China that is now becoming a blockbuster. Because CARVYKTI started in Nanjing, in China.
The Legend one?
Legend one, yes. Legend was a Chinese company. And I remember very well in June 2017 at ASCO, where a Chinese doctor from Xi'an presented the first data on a bit more than 10 patients, 12 patients, I think, with Carvykti. And he had this spectacular 100% response rate. And of course, nobody believed in that. How could you have 100% response rate? And it was a very challenging presentation for this particular physician because he had challenged to answer some of the questions there. But that was starting something. And I remember very well that I was there. And immediately I jumped to a plane to go to China and meet with the people there that I met at the end of June. Ultimately, J&J got the product. But that was a very exciting time. And from the beginning, there was, of course, a lot of skepticism about the type of data, the type of product, why does it have this type of efficacy and how come it could have that good safety and so on. It took a lot of guts and also a lot of time looking at the data in details for companies to license that, like what J&J did, and develop that fully. And kudos to them, because what is happening now is a product that is going to be at least a $5 billion product, if not more, and is having a huge impact on patients. And that's starting in China.
That's great, yeah. I think we'll come back to China, and we'll come back to China. The one thing I'm curious also on the allogeneic, because I mean, you bought basically the first allogeneic drug, at least was approved in Europe, not in the US, from my understanding.
Still some delay in the US.
Some delay.
On CMC, I'll come back to that, on the changes of making these drugs. That occurs in patient post-transplant when there is reactivation of the EBV infection that we all have, that is then created a proliferation of B cells infected by Epstein-Barr virus.
Okay. And so what was the main challenge that you had to overcome, and why did it work at Atara versus all the other allogenic that seem to work way less?
Again, it works because of the data and clinical data, because it really saves life. It's a product that can get about half of the patient responding, and once the patient are responding, they will have an overall survival at 2 years that is over 85%. Whereas if you have that type of disease and you don't respond first-line treatment, which is rituximab, then we'll have an overall survival in the median OS that is only a few weeks to a few months. So that's a huge impact on patient. That's first thing. Always the case that the first and most important example of success is to be based on great clinical data that shows a huge impact in patients.
What led to this great data?
I think it was, again, an academic start at MSKCC with Dr. O'Reilly, starting that in patients, starting to find a way to treat these patients that were kids in particular that unfortunately were dying after having had a transplant from the EBV positive lymphoma that they had that was extremely aggressive. And he was trying to find solutions to that. He developed the precursor of Ebvallo today, the name of the product in Europe. It's not yet approved in the US. And Atara took that as a license from MSKCC and developed it as an industrial product from a manufacturing point of view. And that was a challenge like it was with autologous CAR-T. But here, the different type of regulatory authorities, whether it's the FDA or the EMA, had a very unique way to look at this type of product, because these were, and this is still, the first allogeneic T-cell therapy ever approved. So it's always new for the regulators, and they need to find a way to create a kind of guidance that allows them to look at some aspect like CMC and quality in a way that is adapted to this new technology and not to what they were doing before.
But the CMC should be, I don't know if it should be easier, but at least that was the promise of the allogenic, that it's a bit easier, a bit more standardized.
It's easier, standardized, but the big difference with autologous that one batch can treat hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of patients. And therefore, you want to have the type of robustness in the process as well as the specification that ensure that every batch is going to behave in the same way in patients. Whereas in autologous is one batch, one patient. So in fact, you have a particular risk around the quality, of course, of what is being manufactured. That's just for one particular patient, and not the cells from that patient that are given back to him. Whereas here you take cells from healthy donors or in some other technology from iPSCs, and you transform that into a product that is given to many, many patients. So the level of scrutiny is different, which is a good thing. At the same time, there are some type of regulatory authorities that have a way to look at the clinical data to justify the specifications, other that are a bit more rigid in sometimes to look at what is the level of variability that is acceptable for the type of product. And a cell therapy is always more variable than a small molecule, of course, or even a biologic. I mean, in a cell, you have 42 million proteins. I mean, that means that you have a lot of variability, and you're trying to address that variability, especially when you are making these from healthy donors, where you have also donor variability, for a process that allows to have enough clarity and enough control of the specifications. So they are within a range of different elements, whether it's on potency, on quality, on reproducibility, that allows you to have a product that could be commercialized. And we've achieved that at Atara with Ebvallo.
That's amazing. At the end, it's one of the promise and the benefit that you can scale the production and lower the cost of goods, but it's also, I guess, a challenge. Talking about one thing also on, you haven't mentioned it too much on solid tumor, but I think that was one thing where there's quite high expectation as well, and I think where the reality and the data didn't show or didn't follow. We had actually Adapt on the show before. It's like went down quite a lot, and actually just after they got the first, I think was basically approval for the first, I think they call it engineered cell therapy for solid tumors, at least in the US. It's kind of a niche tumor, niche solid tumor, but they get the first approval. But then the sales didn't follow. How do you look at solid tumors? Like,
I think it's still a lot of potential for cell therapy in solid tumor. You should not forget that solid tumors in general is a very challenging type of disease to address. And if you look across modalities, the number of success are relatively limited in solid tumors. I mean, you have targeted therapies, you have ADCs, you have bispecific, you have radioligand therapies, you have cell therapy. But if you look for each of these modalities, you cannot say that one particular modality has been able to completely change the treatment of solid tumors. Now, within cell therapy, one of the particular challenge is how to make sure that the cells you are making, be it allogeneic or autologous, are able to traffic to the tumor site, to penetrate into the tumors, to expand into the tumors, to be able to target and destroy the tumor cells. Then you have to also address the tumor heterogeneity, because a CAR-T or this type of cell therapy or even a TCR-T will address one particular target. So you will have to make sure that the heterogeneity of the tumors is not going to be a particular hurdle to the efficacy there. And then you have all this immunosuppressive environment of the tumor that is extremely, extremely powerful and impactful, that is going to do anything to stop the activity of that particular T cell that you've modified. So you think about all of these barriers, all of these issues and challenges to circumvent, is really something quite amazing to see some of the data. And we see some data now on some of the CAR-T. And the other aspect is the possibility to combine treatment, and thinking about immunosuppressive environment. If you could combine or sequence treatment in a way where you're going to diminish the ability for the tumor to defend itself against this CAR-T that you are bringing to the tumors, then you could have better efficacy. So that's how it has been working for the last few years. A lot of challenges, but we start to see some data now that are showing a difference.
What's some of the data or breakthrough that maybe one or two that you've seen in the last 12 months that really impressed you?
I think I've seen some GPC-free CAR-T data in hepatocellular carcinoma that looks really interesting. We saw also GD2 in glioblastoma. So there is really some interesting data now. Now this has to be confirmed in pivotal or phase 2-3 type of studies, which are under play right now. And hopefully they will give the type of data that we all expect coming from cell therapy, and in particular in these solid tumors.
And will in vivo CAR-T also enable more towards solid tumor, or?
At this stage, most of the programs that are getting some support, excitement, deals, as you mentioned, are more addressing either the lymphoma, multiple myeloma, leukemia space, or the liquid tumors, or the autoimmune disease, where it's a relatively straightforward goal, which is you have to deplete the B cells.
Okay. Yeah.
And very few targets that allow us to do that. And there is a kind of use of different targets, but the goal is the same, deplete B cells. And it's easier to deplete B cells because they are in the periphery or in the nodes. And provided you have the right type of penetration in the lymph node and some tissues, you can really deplete that. Getting into the tumor in a solid tumor that has been there for some time, where you have a lot of fibrosis and other aspects in immunosuppressive environment that are against the penetration of the T cells is a different challenge. Whether it's in vivo or, by the way, it doesn't change fundamentally whether it's in vivo or autologous or allogeneic. You've got to make sure you can penetrate the tumors, you can expand and persist long enough to be able to act accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. And just curious on the in vivo. I mean, I saw from afar, I saw the companies like Biotech and I think Gilead acquired Interus. I mean, I'm reading the Capstan from AbbVie and Orbital from BMS. I'm just curious on the on exactly what are they changing. I mean, I guess the CMC is it's easier in a way, or the manufacturing will be easier.
Manufacturing is a gene therapy. The in vivo CAR is a gene therapy that is targeting the T cells and modify the T cells.
But you don't need to extract.
You don't need to extract. So simpler is less costly, is simpler. Now, there is a lot of questions about the quality, the gene therapy, so the quality of what you make, the safety, and also the dose, and how that dose is going to be clarified and defined and optimized in patients, because you are relying upon the immune system of the patient to be able to make these modified T cells. And I think there will be some interesting new questions to ask. But I'm confident that ultimately there should be something out of this. But it's going to take some time to refine the dose, the type of, and especially depending on the patient, because you rely again on the immune system. And these patients have different type of immune system in the sense that there have been many of them treated for many years with chemo and other treatment that have an impact on the immune system. So how that is going to allow for a particular dose to create a particular number of in vivo CAR-T that will act accordingly, that's still a question mark, but that seems to be moving at pace. And the first few patients that are, there were some data presented at ASH, they looks very exciting.
But it's still in very early phase one.
Very, very early phase one.
Yes. Okay, so that will still take at least 5 years until commercialization, something like this.
And interestingly, you have, of course, many biotech in China and elsewhere developing this in vivo CAR-T, different type of technologies, but the goal is the same. And then you have either pharma companies that are already in autologous or even in allogeneic, like, of course, Gilead or AstraZeneca, and also new pharmas like AbbVie that were not there, decided to jump ahead and try to see whether that could be the next big thing in terms of new modality for cancer. So the race is on. We'll see who is winning at the end, and I hope the patient will be winning.
Yeah. That's good, yeah.
But this type of new technology is always interesting because it goes in waves. I was very lucky to be involved in the move of Novartis into radioligand therapy a number of years ago, where I was leading the team acquiring AAA and then moving into the Endocyte acquisition that created Lutathera and Pluvicto. So real treatment of neuroendocrine tumors and now prostate cancer with radioligand therapies. And what was amazing that back then, in the 2017-18 time, we were the only one moving into that space. And that created the success of this product, the ability to deliver, again, complex product in terms of manufacturing, supply, and delivery. But if you master that, you can treat a lot of patients. And the impact on patient is very significant. Following that first attempt to really create product that now are achieving a blockbuster status, so many companies went there, so many biotech were created. So it takes time, but once the technology has been proven by someone to be robust enough and impactful enough, robust enough for manufacturing and supply, impactful enough on patients, then there will be a wave of many other companies developing that.
Yeah. It's good. We'll talk about, I think, connected to that into with Jeito as well, of how you bring the whole expertise of what we discussed, and also how you look at different modalities. But one last question on this, more on the modality, because at the end of the day, cell therapy has a lot of promises, but at the end of the day, you care about the data and how you reach the data. not that you don't care, but the data is what matters, whatever the modality.
Right.
And I'm thinking about one thing that I saw recently, which I think was a bispecific. I think was from Roche. I'm not sure, and I think was the data from ASCO or ESMO, where they with the bispecific had basically the same result as I think was Yescarta, or very similar results in terms of complete response rate, but obviously the cost of goods is just like very different.
Bispecific are very impactful and very important, and they have made huge progress. I mean, it was many years ago, I was trying to license when I was at Servier blinatumomab for Micromet, and ultimately Amgen acquired Micromet. And that was the first of its kind. It was before CAR-T at the time. And the results were spectacular, but the complexity of manufacturing and delivery was very significant because you had this permanent infusion and you had to have a pump and so on. But now the bispecific have made huge progress. And I'm on the board of one of the Jeito company called CDR-Life, which is developing bispecific and even trispecific, the variety of T-cell engagers. And that's a great way also to create that immune reaction is with T-cell engagers. They are challenging product to develop because of the way to reach the right dose. And again, it's very much dependent on how the immune system will react to that and how it's going to allow the engagement of these T cells to be able to do whatever killing they need to do. But that's extremely effective. And there have been amazing data now from different type of bispecific into the lymphoma and leukemia space. And now we see trispecific as well. And for example, CDR-Life licensed to Boehringer Ingelheim a trispecific addressing autoimmune disease. Because here again, you can deplete B cells with an autologous CAR-T. You can deplete B cells with an allogeneic CAR-T. You could also try to deplete B cells with a bispecific, or in the case of CDR-Life, a trispecific that will allow to have a complete depletion in a tissue in the periphery, then allowing hopefully the reset of the immune system that will allow the possibility to treat autoimmune patients with B-cell disease like lupus in particular, and others like myasthenia gravis, and to allow this drug-free, symptom-free period for a certain period of time.
Yeah. I like that. So I guess as coming to Jeito, I guess at the end of the day, especially as Jeito, you don't want to be, you want to be a bit quite agnostic on the modality.
That's right.
But at the same time, if a modality has a lot of potential and there's a big wave, you also want to be early in the wave, hopefully, and then catching the wave.
So I think one of the unique aspects of Jeito is that we are very focused on early clinical stage and sometimes late preclinical, but with a good possibility to have element of translational aspect that allows you to have a good idea of what could happen in a clinic there. So we really focus on that stage. So very often we take decisions based on early clinical data. So whatever the modality, we are completely agnostic to the modality. We can see what type of data this type of modality or this type of target is enable the product, the asset to achieve. And then based on that, we can take the decision to invest to be able to support the early to late clinical development and phase 1, phase 2, sometimes to phase 3, to be able to create more value for the patients and for the shareholders.
But you didn't invest, Jeito didn't invest too much in cell therapy.
There were initially a couple of investments in cell therapy. There was a company called Neogen that was acquired then by AstraZeneca. And there is still a company called Quell that is having a very different approach on Tregs this time. So to address a different type of autoimmune disease from modulation of Tregs, through having modified Tregs and CAR Tregs basically, that will allow to have a different type of way to modulate an autoimmune disease. And that's very exciting. They have a partnership with AstraZeneca.
I'm actually talking to the team and to get Jan on the show.
That's a very exciting program they're doing there.
Yeah, that's cool. And I talked to Stefano from Azafaros in Basel, and that's a small molecule, but the data seems very promising as well.
That are very exciting, and this is the type of investment we are doing sometimes to invest into the funding of the phase 3. So So that's, as I say, the sweet spot of Jeito is more the early clinical phase 1-2, but sometimes we are ready also to invest. We have sufficient funds to be able to support phase 3 when we think, together with the other investors and the biotech, of course, that this is the best way to create more value for patients and shareholders is to go into phase 3. And that's the case of Azafaros, who is now embarking into a very exciting phase 3 for lysosomal storage disease.
Yes. Like I like the focus on. I was about to ask you also on the differentiation of Jeito as well compared to other VCs, but one thing I see from the outside and from knowing a bit the team and from following is that you're ready to write pretty big checks, but not necessarily on the platform or the promise more on like, okay, we have there's a product quite like early or quite well defined, and then with a pretty clear clinical milestones coming, with a pretty clear, I think, also path to exit in quite some cases as well.
That's right.
And
in fact, if you summarize it, it's a mix of being focused on this early clinical, late preclinical stage where we can have clinical data relatively soon that will create value.
Yeah.
And there will be different type of exit windows, whether it's M&A or IPOs or whatever. That will be based on data, on clinical data, because we strongly believe that what makes a difference is clinical data that are differentiated from whatever exists or whatever is being developed. Now, this being said, we are able to invest sufficiently in a company to support that development into the clinic, but at the same time to have a significant share of the company so we can sit at the table at the board level and really help influence in a positive way the plan for value creation and development. Yeah. And that's another aspect that is very important at Jeito, that within Jeito or with our network of consultants, the ability to rely on expertise and experience to help the company. Yeah. Because whatever biotech, and I've led biotech myself for many years, you don't have all the competencies necessary within the company. You need to have support there. And having an investor that is not only giving you money to develop your exciting and innovative asset, but also going to help you with either its network or if it's on people. I mean, within Jeito, we have, for example, most recently joining us was Karin van Bellen, who is the former head of regulatory affairs at J&J, is now chief regulatory advisor. We have people like Sabine Tandigia as a partner or Xenia, who are really very expert and experienced in commercialization of products. We have Annette Clancy, who is the former head of BD at GSK, who is working with us as well. Myself having different type of experience to support this kind of collaborative, collegial approach to support the different companies of the portfolio, not only with funding, but also with the way to fine-tune, to adapt, to optimize the strategies and the execution of these strategies to be able to create value for patients and for shareholders.
Yeah. I like that. A bit, I like that, and I've seen also. I mean, I had Othello on the show, which I've seen you co-invest quite a lot.
Oh yeah, and we have a very exciting company together with Othello called Catalym. I think this one is really going to be.
You're on the board, right now.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's to me, I've been invested or looking at investment or doing BD and M&A in the field of immuno-oncology for many, many years. Yeah. And I remember very well when I started that was 2015, and at the time everybody was either trying to see, okay, do we need a PD-1? Do we need a PD-L1 as a pharma company? Yeah. And could it be better than the one that exists? And then at the same time, what else? And the what else has been there for 10 years now.
No,
unfortunately, so far, everything has been rather disappointing. The bispecific is a different story, but something you add to a PD-1 or PD-L1 has been relatively disappointing, whether it's been IDO, TIGIT, lag-free, team-free. And some of them have reached the market, but nothing has really been able to transform the level of efficacy, because what we all know is that the checkpoint blockers have been amazing in terms of the impact on patients, but there is a plateau, limited threshold of efficacy. I mean, you have this 20% response, you have this 40% response in melanoma, and nothing has been able to go over that. I strongly believe that Catalym might be, with their anti-GDF15, a way to go over that, because it's directly addressing the primary resistance and the acquired resistance to checkpoint blockers. So let's see. We are now embarking on 4 phase 2b in parallel. The results from phase 2a are very exciting. They've been presented at ESMO, not only in terms of second-line lung, second-line HCC, where you have very deep response and very prolonged response, but also in a very nice study to look at contribution of components, where we are combining visugrumab, the anti-GDF15 from Catalym, with nivolumab in neoadjuvant bladder cancer, and showing that the combination of the two will triple the response rate in these patients. So that's quite impressive, and still early days, but we are very excited about this, Otero and myself, and the other investors, of course.
That's cool. We could come back to Catalym, and I'm talking with them as well, and should have them on the show soon. And coming back to the model, I'm still a bit curious on the similarity. I think Othello is definitely one of them. Jeito Capital, I think you co-invest with that, and they're also quite similar model of like quite big check, quite defined assets. I think Kate at SV also quite similar as well. First was a question if you kind of agree, but I think you quite agree.
No, I mean, the idea to have significant support for companies and to be able to support companies over time, because it's a long road to success. Yeah. It's a very challenging road. So you need to have an investor that is going to support you and help you to go through the twist and turn that allows to create value ultimately. And you need, of course, an investor with a deep pocket and also a strong belief in what you're doing, but also the possibility to work in a collaborative way with the entrepreneur, with the CEO and this team to be able to create value. And that's what we are doing at Jeito, trying to do.
Yeah. But a bit provocative question, but I'm wondering why not more VC would go after the same model? Like, is it just, why would not more people do that?
I think everybody tries to do a bit of the same. It's more about the execution and how you do it. And ultimately, it's about the people. Yeah. It's about the quality of the people that you have in a team that allows to do the right type of work, from sourcing and selection of assets and companies you want to really invest in, to the support, to the ability to help them over time and get to value creation. But it's a mix of the people from the fund, from the investors, and the people from the company. So we pay a lot of attention, for example, at Jeito, in the team, because we invest as much in an asset as we invest in the team. And we've seen, at least for myself, I've been there for some decades now, seen a lot of great products that were not developed in the right way because of the team. And I'm not criticizing an individual. It's just that sometimes, whether it's a big pharma, by the way, or with biotech, just didn't get the right people, or didn't get the right investment, or didn't get both to be able to develop a great asset.
Yeah. I think I've heard it several times on the show that execution is a lot. Execution is the team executing.
I think another aspect of Jeito is our particular focus in Europe, and we think there are amazing assets in Europe, amazing teams that need support, both funding and also execution support to be able to succeed. And that's also something that some other funds are not doing. Of course, in the US, you have the funds around Boston, around the Bay Area and other areas of clusters that are very successful. But many of these funds don't look at Europe. And we're here to look at Europe and making sure that European asset technologies and great entrepreneur could get the support they need to create great products.
Yeah. I like that. Especially, we talked with Othello about it, but I think also first the model, he was quite early in investing in Europe, and obviously he has a European connection as well, but I think getting access to some of the assets that were just at a European discount compared to US or global assets, and then kind of closing the gap with the US and bringing the finance, more US financing and more bigger financing seems to have worked well. And I think now more people look at maybe more VCs.
I think more people, they look at it. There was a very interesting case recently, probably the most frustrating case for European investors or European companies is the case of Metsera. So you probably know the story of Metsera. Metsera was a company funded by, Arch Venture and another fund from the US in 2022, sold in 2025, 3 years later for $10 billion to Pfizer. I'm not going to talk about the particular circumstances of this M&A. What I'm talking about the origin, because fundamentally this company was created to address a need, which is new product in obesity, metabolism, cardiovascular. And then they went shopping around. And they went shopping where? A few products in Korea, okay? But the real asset that created value came from London. Okay, it came from London, from Imperial College, Professor Bloom. That was one of the, and still is, one of the key leaders in the field of obesity and GLP-1. He has been at the origin of GLP-1 discovery. And there was a particular spin-out from Imperial. That particular company was acquired in 2024 by Metsera. And in that acquisition, they got a number of peptides, and one of them...
way less than 10 billion.
Exactly. But it was, I mean, it's public here. They paid 34 million upfront and 200 million up milestone for something that 2 years later, basically, it was not the only product, but it was the top product, was sold for 10 billion. So it's a lesson for all of us that there is a lot of gems in Europe. We have to go out and find them.
I like the message of optimism. Yes. I'm thinking on the. I had one thing on the model. I feel like just from a like a bit from a trend, but I feel like more and more VCs in the last few years try to focus a bit more on assets, but they're still. If I look at if I categorize a bit roughly, but more like the platform VCs, the size VC. I mean, Flagship. I think you worked with Flagship a bit.
Yes.
They like to take very early science, but usually quite platform, quite large applications. Arch, I would say, is a bit in this bucket as well, versus more asset-centric, I guess. Othello or RA are always quite asset-centric. And then you even have the model of more like asset-centric, but even more like virtual, very small teams, or even like just pure asset execution, like Medicine in London. Like, I don't like, more like, I feel like there's more conversion towards assets in the recent years. I don't know, how do you look at these like models? And
I think it's been a lot to do also with the market. I mean, interestingly, in private investment and building up companies, everybody is still influenced by the public market some ways, you know. And there was a number of years ago, a lot of platform companies would get technology-led platform that were able to go to IPOs. I mean, as you remember, the year 2020-21 were amazing in terms, I think it was like 80 to 90 IPOs a year. Now we are like, 16 last year, maybe 8 so far this year. So it's very small numbers. But there were a lot of platform companies being able to value at very high level. And cell therapy is a good example. Gene therapy and cell therapy, you had Lyell, you had this type of companies, Sana, that were just platform company at the beginning that were valued at very, very high level. Now, this flopped mainly because then you need to have product and you need to have clinical data that justify the value of the platform, the value of the product coming from the platform. And that just takes time, okay? And in the public market, the problem, if you don't have any news, anything new, any data and so on, you start to be taken on the side and your value is just dwindling. So that created a lack of interest recently in platform companies. I still think we need platform companies. We need platform companies that make the right choice in terms of where they're going to focus and invest. And sometimes you have VCs, you mentioned Flagship, that can invest for many, many years in platform till there is something coming out of that. But others are a bit more impatient and wants to see something coming. I mean, we've decided at Jeito to focus on this clinical stage asset because we think that's where we can evaluate clearly the potential for success and we can support and help the companies to achieve success.
And on the virtual model, because
virtual model is still something
that virtual or very small team.
It's still something that is being used in even within the Jeito environment. We are not against that. I think it depends very much. Like if there was a particular, take a spin out for pharma. I mean, if you take a couple of products from pharma company that are on the shelves for strategic reasons, not for reasons linked with the absence of value there, and then you spin that out, you might want to create companies that are more a bit virtual, where you're going to use CROs, CDMOs, and various consultants to get through. I mean, we have one company that is doing amazing work. I'm on the board of that company called Xylocor in the US, in Philly, that is developing a gene therapy for coronary disease. And it's very fascinating technology that has been initially particularly developed at Cornell. And that technology is around injecting the VEGF genes into the cells of a myocardium, enabling then revascularization coming from these cells being able to form new vessels. And there is different isoform of VEGF that you need and a particular product there. And it's about then the injection into the myocardium through a procedure that uses a catheter, a device. And that has done shown very great progress in patients with advanced coronary disease and refractory angina in a phase 2A study. And now we're embarking on 2 phase 2B studies versus sham. So that company is doing a very exciting program. There is only about 12 people in the company. Okay, so it depends what you call virtual. It's not virtual. There is a team there. They're increasing slightly now. They're probably going to be more like 20, but they rely on a lot of partners, a network of partners, consultants to be able to do studies. But this small company is doing 2 phase 2B studies right now in coronary disease, in large number of patients, in a large number of sites across the US and Europe in a very successful way.
Yeah, that's gross. Maybe, I mean, I guess you mentioned some of the advantages of Jeito, and I guess that's some of the reason why you joined. But can you go a bit more into your decision to join and also the timing? I mean, you were CEO at Atara, then you transitioned to chairman and then now I think you have a more active role in Jeito. What was the decision making there?
It's not a strategic decision; it's more an opportunistic one. But I've known Raphael, the founder of Jeito, for a number of years. And I admire what she's been able to create and do. And I also admire a way to really have a gut feeling and intuition for great investment thesis and great asset for patients. I mean, the fact that she's an MD, PhD, and she always thinks about the patient, but she has also this amazing experience in investment. She has, as we say in French, the nose for finding the right asset. And I've seen that over many years. And when I decided that's where the opportunistic part comes in, I had, for personal reason, to move back to Europe because of family health reasons. So I couldn't stay in the US. Unfortunately, I would have stayed. I mean, I was very happy in California. I would have stayed for a number of years there. But I had to move back with my wife. And then moving back, I couldn't take a CEO job at this stage because of his family situation. Okay. So I said, what can I do? And immediately Raphael say, oh, you should work more with us, because I was already an advisor for Jeito. And I love the team. I love the way they work. And I think they're going to be very, very successful in the way they approach investment there. So I jump and say yes. So that's how I became operating partner Jeito. And very happy to be.
And what exactly you're doing at operating partner? I mean, you're, I guess, helping more operationally the companies, but what exactly...
Yeah, in 3 ways. One is to be on the board of some companies. I mentioned Xylocor, Catalym, CDR-Life, for example. The other way is to help proportionally other companies when a particular partner that is on the board of these companies has some questions. I mean, either because I have an expertise and experience there, like in cell therapy, or because I could bring some other views, like on BD and M&A aspect. So operational support. And then, of course, I'm part of the project review committee. So I'm following and evaluating some of the potential investment of Jeito. And I'm also an observer on the investment committee.
Okay. But then the operation, I mean, that's quite similar to a more traditional partner, or what the operation is that you have more pharma experience, or what's the...
Yeah, I bring more my pharma and biotech experience as a CEO of biotech, as a leader in pharma, from commercialization to R&D, portfolio management, and to development of product into the play. So it's really, I mean, the title in Jeito do not mean much. What is more important is this approach that we bring together some different type of expertise and experience that works collectively in a very collegial way to be able to, again, make the right decision, hopefully, in terms of investment. And then once we invest into a company, support the company to achieve success.
Like that. Yeah. No, I was curious about this operating word. It's on the location. Maybe quickly. I mean, you were basically in San Francisco, I think, for quite some time. And yes, Sylvain Garrel, who introduced us. Yes, that's about your relation to San Francisco. And now I think you're mostly based in London, correct?
Yes, I'm based in London now. Yeah.
But before you had some experience also in France, I think with Servier.
In fact, spent 10 years in the US, 4 years in New York and then in New Jersey when I was at Novartis, and then 6 years in the Bay Area.
Yeah, okay. So basically 20 years in the US, and I guess roughly the same time in France, Europe, or similar?
Yeah, I've been around. So.
How do you how do you look at it? Is there maybe some lessons for the audience? I mean, I guess you have many lessons, but maybe some lessons in terms, especially biotech pharma lessons, from your specific connected to your locations, from West Coast, East Coast, Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky, and I'm not sure it's a lesson. It's just sometimes about opportunity and to be at the right place at the right time. And very early in my career, I spent 3.5 years in Asia, in Taiwan, and all across Asia. So that's where I started to understand how Asia could be really the next big thing. Then I work a lot in Europe, but also with Canada and South Africa and Australia. Then I decided to go to the US because I wanted really to be at the core of the main engine of innovation today, even though now China is moving very fast and Europe is still having a say there. And that's why I spent 10 years in the US. So I think the most important lesson I've learned myself is you need to be adaptable and to be able to understand the culture enough of the country, the company, and the people you're working with to make sure you can create a team or work with in a team approach that will create value and not barriers and roadblocks. And there are so many reasons to fail that are not linked with what we're trying to achieve, not linked with the asset, the product, the disease you're working on. And you need to make sure you pay attention to that. And this adaptability and ability to understand how people can work better together as a team is probably the main thing I've learned over the many years, is you need to find ways to work with people, again, to avoid all these issues, roadblocks, and kind of time of obsolescence of ideas and innovation that comes if you don't have a great team and great people working together.
It resonates. It resonates a lot to me. But in short, I mean, I'm French-German, so kind of good European, work with a lot of people across Europe. First company, today's company, I think we're like 10 different nationalities. And then I finished my studies in the US. My wife is Chinese. I start to have quite an exposure. And I think I 100% agree on that. And this adaptability, but I think you cannot learn it by just, listen to a podcast, but maybe listening, you can realize it and maybe drive some decisions of getting some exposure and probably at least living a few years or more.
Yeah, I think living a few years in a region. Because you need to understand how people function and to make sure then you can work efficiently with people.
Yeah. And this adaptability, I think it's tough, but I think it's key. Like when you look at not just what's best in every region, which I think is an asset, but once you also can adapt to the different working culture and within this, I mean, within American people are very different.
A lot of differences.
When you can adapt and make it work with, it's really powerful.
I know in the US there are a lot. Even when you move from New York and the East Coast to California, it's a different world. And even within California, within Northern California and Southern California, is not exactly the same culture.
Yeah, and SF Silicon Valley is quite a specific mindset as well. So yeah, that's cool. That's really good. Maybe on the maybe coming back to China, I think you did quite some comments as well on like that. I think there's a lot of innovation coming. I mean, there's a lot of data coming, and now it seems more and more true. I feel like it's hard to exactly size it, as in like at least I feel like to really
size it in what way?
Size it in terms of like I feel like there's some exaggeration, typically coming from the US, where I feel like some trends are always like kind of extrapolated in some ways. As in like, we will be bypassed and they will crush us soon. Versus at the same time, there's a lot of data and a lot of deals done and products on the market as well. At the same time, a lot of opportunities. At the same time, pharma going like very active in terms of BD because there are opportunities and maybe they can get it cheaper as well. I mean, it's quite complex. Yeah. I don't know like how you like.
I mean, first of all, I think it's just a balancing act of making clearly the investment for many years, the level of science, the level of the brains that exist there, and the energy to do things and be innovative and create things. makes it now very big because they are very big and they put a lot of money, put a lot of brains at work there. It's a balance between US and China that makes sense. Now, Europe in the middle is a little bit challenged, mostly on the funding and the way to get the right team to work together, but also the typical European disparities and differences between countries that are not always is the best way to work together. But this being apart, is putting apart that, I think they're going to be still a need to be global in the way you manage innovation, which is contrarian to some of the geopolitical forces right now that are towards the end of globalization. But I think we could be global still because the patients are the same. And science, I strongly believe, is the same when it is done in the same way, in the right way, in a quality way. So how are you going to be able to leverage this ability to be global in a world that is becoming less global and to avoid the pitfall of geopolitics? That's, to me, is going to be one of the recipes for success. Give you an example, just not too big, too contextual. Today, you could say, okay, we have amazing new innovative asset being developed in China, but they need to be globalized. Yeah. And the Chinese companies of today are not yet ready to do that by themselves. We'll see in the future how it goes, but not yet. So they rely upon partnership, whether it's new companies being formed, and we are looking at a lot of opportunities like that. When you take some asset in China that you're going to, with early clinical data, you're going to globalize them with proper development in the US and in Europe and moving forwards to make them really product that could have an impact on the patients. At the same time, you might also do like the industry has done and had been addicted to for the last 15 years, which is doing things cheaper in China at the CRO, CDMO level. And there have been great success of companies that have established high quality Chinese work, Chinese made work on CRO, CDMO level, whether it's WuXi or GenScript and others there. So this has been happening, and we are leveraging that ourselves at Jeito with our companies on a daily basis there. Now you can go beyond that, and you can try to really optimize every aspect of the global world, what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in China, or even some other countries like Australia that has very unique specificity for phase one that allows you, when you leverage that well, to go faster and better there. Yeah. So Singapore is another case where there are also some interesting things. So how can you leverage all that global world with helping the small biotech that is based, whatever, it doesn't really matter, it's based in Europe, it's based in the US, it's based somewhere else, to leverage that with your network so they can accelerate innovation development, leveraging any type of way to go faster, to go better for the patients and for the value creation there.
I like that. Yeah. I think it's good you also examples to be more specific. And one example that is quite striking to me was like the amount of investments. If you compare region by region, and I think basically China is, I think even just in VC investment is higher than the total of Europe. I think in the last year, I think was a bit higher, but a similar level.
The numbers are big because the country is rich now and has a lot of money, and the country has decided, China, that the pharma biotech is strategic, which Europe has never decided. US has decided for a long time, but Europe never decided that. And I think that's a big, big mistake that Europe is making of not saying this is strategic for the future. And there is a need of proper development, organization, support for this type of industry. But that's being put aside. In China, strategic is going very fast. But I think one colleague that is working a lot with China, not from Jeito, told me recently that it's been of Darwinism pushed to the extreme in China, because there is so much money that, and so much pressure on the entrepreneur to succeed, that it's okay, you succeed, you fail, you disappeared, you succeed, you fail, you disappeared, and so on. That ultimately what we see as coming from China is the emergence, is the top of the iceberg of a huge investment and sometimes waste of energy and money that didn't go through, and you just see the success there. So in some ways, the volume itself is paying off, as usual, in what we're doing in this industry, where there is so much failures that if you do more, you hope that some would succeed. So whether it's the strongest and the fastest that are succeeding in China, or whether there's something else in the efficiency of the system, to me it's unclear today. But certainly the volume is there. Now, there is still a need to be able to help and work, again, collaboratively in a way that bring different views, different experience and expertise. And then ultimately there is a patient, because we should not forget that. Coming back to the patient is always the key for what we're doing. How do you get good clinical data? And to get good clinical data, you need to access patient. You need to access the right patient for the right type of product or the right type of protocol. And the good thing about China is that you have so many patients that are in need of treatment that they are ready to participate in clinical studies. It's so easier, faster to do phase 1 in oncology in China today compared to the US. It's cheaper. It's about twice faster. Okay, phase 3 is about the same. It's really phase 1, because many people in the US are either reluctant to participate in the studies, or there is so much administrative burden around a phase 1 first in human, for sometimes good reason, come from the past issues, experience. But it is a fact today that if you have access to patients faster in these countries, better to go there to at least de-risk your asset and understand better how does it perform in patients. And as you know, there are many modalities where the in vivo animal data doesn't really say much. You need to go to patients, and patients, of course, that are willing to participate to studies because they want something new for their disease or their particular condition they have. And here you have so many patients available. And that's explained a lot why the faster and cheaper is related to that. Whereas in the US or in Europe also, in most countries, it's more challenging to get to this patient in first in human. And therefore it's costlier, it takes more time, it's more complex, and you don't have always the right patient.
I think we discussed, I don't remember who said that, but I think one of the takeaway, for Europe, which seems quite clear, but this has to be done more at the European level, was to facilitate patient access and running clinical trials.
Yes.
It's not the easy problem to solve.
The time to IND, I mean, when you have in pharma only biotech, when you have a new asset and you have good preclinical data, you look at the country and say, where do I go? And if you look at that, you have some countries are going to take 18 months to get to the first patient. Other countries are going to be 3 months. Where do you go?
Maybe a last, before we do a quick fire, kind of quick questions. A last one is actually about Europe and especially about France, still on the industry level, because obviously you said, China is doing very well, but I think Europe actually recently has never been doing so well. I think it's Fabrice, I guess you work with him, Fabrice Chouaki.
Yes.
He said that I think Europe has never been doing so well, and he's very optimistic about Europe as well, which I think was a good way to look at it. And I think France recently did really well as well. I think I had actually Mark on the show, which I think you're on, on the board.
Mark is amazing, yeah.
And Abivax
is a great story.
Great story.
And there will be many more stories like that in the future. There are a lot of gems in Europe.
And actually, Laurent from Biotech was also on the show. And then I've seen that you're on the board of Medincell, which
it's a very exciting company.
Also passed the $1 billion mark.
Right.
How do you maybe a quick comment on, especially on the French biotech ecosystem, where I remember I heard for several years, there's no $1 billion biotech in France, whatever the reasons, but now you have basically 3 on top of very good biopharma still. So how do you look at it?
I think if you look at this particular example, it's about management a lot.
Yeah.
And having the ability to have managers that have been around and have also crossed borders. Mark has spent a lot of time in the US. Christophe Douat, the CEO of Medincell, has also worked in different countries, has been an investor before, and so on. So it's the quality of the management. The quality of the asset is a question of selection of the right asset. And the way Medincell is managing his portfolio, I don't know so much about nanobiotics, but the way Mark decided to take over the CEO role at Abivax, he did a real diligence, and he said, okay, there is an asset there, but it needs to be developed in the right way. So we're going to work in details to make sure that the studies are done in a way that could really optimize our chance of success. And here it is. They've been very successful there. So management to me is a key. And having these managers that have been around, that have done work in the US, work in Europe, and know how to handle different type of situations like that, and now how to create value for patients and for shareholders has been a key difference. And the other one has been money, the funding, and the ability to get the funding. And that's where Jeito is playing a a significant role to help these companies from France and elsewhere in Europe to get the money they need to be able to create value.
That's amazing. Yeah. Cool. Last 3-4 minutes, just quicker, more shorter questions, shorter answers. Maybe one more optimistic one to start with. Will 2026 be an even better year for European biotech than 2025?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. I mean, if you just think about the Jeito portfolio, we have number readout coming next year. Very exciting time. We have a lot of investment opportunities. So it's going to be a great year.
Should a young biotech professional go into cell therapy today or rather ADCs or bispecifics?
They should go where they are really excited and passionate about. I think excitement and passion is what makes a difference, especially when you're young in biotech. And you should follow your passion. You should follow your intuition, and you will learn for that.
Yeah. One mistake you made in the past 3 months?
Past 3 months. Oh. I probably don't know yet whether it was a mistake, because 3 months is a very short time in our industry to know whether it's a mistake or not. I probably made a lot of more mistake on the personal, but I'm not going to talk about it over the past 3 months.
Let's say in the past 3 years then.
Past 3 years, I think the particular mistake, has been that we have had some challenges at the time in Atara in manufacturing. And when you are in cell therapy, you need to have the right CDMO. And it's public because, of course, it's been announced in January this year that there was a delay, a complete response letter due to CDMO, or the CDMO that Atara was using at the time, not passing the inspection on just basic GMP things. Okay. And that's interesting because I recently joined the board of a very specialized cell therapy CDMO called Roslin City, which is really trying to have a more agile, collaborative way to work with biotech and pharma to make their product. They are making Casgevy for Vertex, for example. Yeah. And they are really working very closely. And I think in cell therapy, the relationship between the biotech or the pharma and the CDMO is a different relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. It is a partnership for the long term. Yeah. And if you have the right
manufacturing
CDMO,
is part of the product.
If you find the right CDMO where you can really establish a true transparent partnership about working together, not only to pass through the inspection, but to make this drug on a robust and reliable way for the future, then you can achieve great things.
Good. What do many people get wrong about your role at Jeito?
They might not understand what operating partner means.
No, they do.
No, they do.
Maybe what do many people get wrong about the role of VCs in biotech in general?
I think many people think they are short-term oriented and they're just there to get an exit, which I think, especially in the case of Jeito, we are really long-term oriented. Of course, we are looking for an exit because that's part of the cycle of the fund. I mean, we raise funds with LPs to be able to create value and give that part of that value back to our LPs. So there is, of course, a focus on return on investment, and an exit, and faster the better, is one of the goals. But we know also the challenges for an entrepreneur and a CEO of biotech and a C-suite of a biotech and all the team of biotech to create value, and how you need to be resilient, you need to be persistent, you need to be creative and hardworking to create that value. So very often people think that the VCs are only short-term type focus. We are not. We're thinking long-term, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we support with all the challenges, roadblocks, twists and turns of the road to value creation, the different biotech we are working with.
Second last question, one of your biotech heroes or mentors?
I think David Epstein has been one of my mentors. He recruited me at Novartis. And as I said, I was amazed by the bet he made on CAR-T, on Kymriah very early on, and how he tried to implement that into the company. And he's had a lot of success and challenges as well. It's not a road in the innovation is not always full of success, but it's increasing. It's been amazing for me.
Cool. And the last one, one advice to 40 years old Pascal.
Take even more risk and enjoy what you're doing every day.
Great. Thanks, Pascal.
Thank you. Thank you, Philippe. A pleasure.
I'm impressed by Pascal's clarity on cell therapy, but also on biotech investments. I'm also impressed by his views of the global biotech ecosystems and also his humility and friendliness. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, follow, or review button. Any of these actions would help a lot of new listeners discover the podcast. And if you want to support us even further, you can make a donation by clicking on the link in the description below. If you want to see similar videos, please feel free to check out our channels where we have many more. I would also be curious to hear what you think. So if you could comment wherever you are or shoot me an email at philip@flot.bio. That's philip@flot.bio. All right. Thanks for staying to the end and see you in the next episode.